thank you everyone for coming to this REDCap workshop sponsored by the CTSI Biostatistics Epidemiology and Research Design BERD at USC, and also TSRI Biostatistics Core at CHLA. So I'll start with two things: introducing our team, the BERD team, led by Dr. Mack, myself in the Biostatistics Core, and all the excellent statisticians in the group. I'm not gonna go over the names, but you can see, and probably you have seen and worked with some of them. So I'm not sure we want to do any more, but again, this is our team, and it's fun to work with them. And one of our special invited presenters today is Naoko Kono. She was very nice and accepting to help us in this workshop. I'm very happy in particular because she's to be helping me for some of the stuff we're going to be doing. Okay. So before that, I want to make a statement here. There are typos that you found or we will find, and those are my doing, not the group. This is my doing. So please forgive my me missing those typos, but I guess having this was fast in many ways. So a quick overview of what we're going to be doing, and you can learn how to create and use databases using REDCap, and there'll be different things we're going to learn: how to create forms, events, study arms, users, whatever that means at this point. And also for using, we have the data entering data, retrieving data, and stuff like that. It will be, of course, much more specific as we go. Again, another claim here is that this is not about data management. It's not a workshop about data management. This is a workshop about learning how to use REDCap. But it's still, I want to just say a few words about data management. So somehow we motivate the need of a good data capturing system, such as REDCap. I'll start by saying a few words why data management is important, or having a data management plan. There are many things, but a few of them are just to keep data integrity, security, consistency, to have scheduled backups, to have data sharing and recovery systems in place. Again, I said there are other reasons why we want to do this. I'll show you. I'm listing only a few things that I have experienced myself. There are many other reasons why it is important to have a data management plan and system in place. One of those is losing data after publication. That happens about 70% of some of the cases, or some of there's a review of cases, about 17% are lost after publication. And all of us have experienced, at least the older ones have experienced, losing data on their PC, storing their PCs, and the estimate is about 31%. And actually, the estimated percent any given year is about 6% of people losing data on the PCs. Another example I found in my past is multiple copies of a data set. That is a nightmare when you're trying to do data analysis and stuff like that. I've seen it. I've seen case report forms being changed, and that creates another nightmare for everyone, of course, including statisticians. Some of the elements of data management, as I said, I'm not going to go over this. Visually, the statistician people believe are involved with the study design and with a data analysis plan. And people think of us, I would say, the statisticians as first, we can help with the sample size power calculations, what we do, and then we're going to crunch numbers instead of saying we're going to do data analysis, which includes data analysis plans and other things. So we are much more than that. But also we have a strong communication with investigators and others to participate in the study conduct, in particular data management, which, again, some of the elements includes this: data management, having a data management plan, data acquisition and capturing, documentation, organizing data, securing data. There's a lot of sensible information we capture nowadays, or we need. It's not been always, but now we have this capability of storing vast amount of data, and this is very, very important. Storage now is more widely available, and also there's why the need for backing up the data and the data sharing is also very important, because economic reasons, because of scientific reasons, again, for instance, reproducibility of findings, it is important. Now, why it's data management also important? One of the reasons that we know is important is that in the process of the study, one is to create reports. And we have to go to the funder and say, this is what we are getting so far. It could be final reports, it could be reports that are interim as well. Same thing with reports to the FDA. If that is a study that will be reported to the FDA, reports to data monitoring committees, steering committees, and other external advisory boards. So for those reasons, it is good to have in place a good data management plan. It saves us a lot of time and adds a lot to our study. Within the data management plan, I'm including here the electronic data capture. Actually, to be the data capturing in place. We have to have something that within the data management that says, the data management plan that says how we're going to do it, and that we have to do it in the right way. Now, of course, for that, there is involvement of the study design, or there is steps in the study design with in collaboration, the PIs in collaboration with the statisticians, that have to determine, for instance, what fields you need, what are the case report forms you need, how you're going to do a database, the overall design of the database, and how you're going to capture your data. Now, I'm saying, yes, you need that. The reason why I'm saying that in here is because the aims of the study are very well established at the beginning, right? So all that information pertains to how we are going to address the study questions. That is important, right? So data capture forms. We do capture data, and when we have a study, we know that we create these forms. In the past, I've seen it. All these paper forms are all over the place. They change all the time. But for the most part, a study will have forms of instruments that are captured, like, from starting from the enrollment list to demographics to medications, and all of that. And again, all of that is related to what the study aims are. And it's important for the process, for reports, for data quality, safety, and all of that. So this is something that we have to do and say, I'm going to get all this data in the system, entering the system, and I need to know how, but I need to have a system in place. Now, one thing here that it's just for me to repeat what I said before. It is believed that statistician goes from study design to data analysis, and from every now and then to publications. You expect that statistician working on publications, but as I said before, sometimes what happens is statistician seen as a number cruncher doesn't get to publications. It's important. It's very, very important. Again, I'm just repeating this, but this is a group where we said, and I know you know it, but it is important to say. So data system collection. How do we capture data? There are many different systems of electronic data capture, or EDC. They include Excel, Access, Oracle, Microsoft Access, Microsoft Excel, I should say. SurveyMonkey, you always seen. Some of the statistical packages have or had capabilities for electronic for EDC. Epidata was a I call it a REDCap attempt. It was free as well. And the last one I listed, not because is the last, and not because it's the worst, but I think is the best. And I'm listing also Excel in blue there, because Excel is the most prevalent system people use, and it seems to be easier, but sometimes people make it too complicated. And if you have used, I've seen that, you see that it's complicated of what is presented. So in this workshop, we're gonna spend all the next 4 hours talking about REDCap. Okay? Now, what is REDCap? REDCap, we have it here, is the research electronic data capture. Oops, sorry. Is used for over about 2 million users in over 5,000 institutions. Publications are coming every day, and users actually are being added to the system. REDCap, as far as I understand, is still free. It's not for individuals, but it's for institutions that become members. I'm not sure if there should be some contribution for the development or the improvement of REDCap. This is what we're going to use. It is, again, a system for data capture. And before we talk more about it or do more with it, some of the principles of database design. Remember that we said the statisticians get involved, and I'm going to mention that again. I will keep saying that probably a few more times. It is the next time I said, you have to talk to a statistician before you designing your database. Remember that objectives of the study have to be addressed, and how the data are collected and what is to be collected to answer the questions is important. Have only one central database. It's a must. Real database system, and by that we mean, again, have a system that allows you for all those elements of database management, or if not all, most of them, I should say. So always make a copy of the database before updating. What happens that many of us, it happened to me and others, that you'd update the database and you lose what you have done, and you lose the original data sometimes. Back up your data. Simple is best. That's why this is one of the reasons sometimes we like Excel, I think. Because, nice metrics of numbers seems to be perfect. Sometimes it's a nightmare to work with it, but that simple structure we like. Also, from the database system with the captured data, where the data was captured, needs to go sent to a statistical software package, right? And that's another component of principle that we have to have in place. Make your data auditable, and that improves quality control. That you're gonna know who is using the database, how the database were changed, and stuff like that. It keeps the data healthy. So what's REDCap 2? The database system focus on streamlining the process from the clinician and statistician's point of view. Captures data from surveys and other clinical studies. Quick development of a database. This is important. You will see how nice it is if you haven't yet. You can allow for database, web-based data entry, creates clinical report forms, We saw that it's one of the reasons why you want to have a good data management system in place, and this is one of those. Researchers are in charge of the entire database development and management. The scheduling support is something you will like as well, and as I mentioned before, the need for audit trails, or the data being auditable. This is one thing you can get from REDCap. Again, the limited reports come back, but in most cases, you get the reports you need for some of the agencies or groups that boards you're required to. Now, what is it that REDCap doesn't do? It's not an administrative tool. You know, the reason for me hitting the big box between study design and data analysis, the box was bigger because it happens to me actually when I teach a statistical course. The students think that now the data gonna come clean, it's easy, and nothing happens between. No, nothing much happens between the study design and the study the data analysis, but a lot of stuff is going on here. So REDCap is not going to be doing that for you. This is important too. Does not prevent researchers from making pool databases or conducting pool research. Remember that the database has to correspond to data, to the study questions, and you have to know what fields you collect and how you collect them so that you answer the questions you need to answer. Once again, consult BASTA decisions before you go to production mode, meaning that in the REDCap, you have to go to a production mode, and you will see what that means a few slides ahead of us. Make sure all data forms IRB approved before modifying the database. You know that all of you have been doing research, and you know the importance of IRB approval. Database REDCap does not create a sophisticated, normalized relational database, but that's something that one of the principles we established before. Create a simple database. There is nothing wrong with simple statistical analysis or anything you do. Simple is not bad, and this is what we're after here. And that's one of the probably features or nice features of REDCap. It doesn't get complicated when it doesn't need to be complicated. It's not interactive with researchers. You get what you give. That's what we have. Now, considerations here. Again, we pointed out the importance of IRB approval. So, as we have here, let's see. So, all research that involves either participation of human subjects or the use of human biological specimens, medical charts of databases, including with identified information, is considered to be human research and requires IRB approval. Yeah, this is the idea of human subjects and other data, including chart reviews. REDCap now resides in a HIPAA compliant server. That means also that all the users need to be HIPAA certified. Review charts, or chart reviews. This reviews could be expedited, or the IRB approval could be expedited, and you know, we have many of those, at least in what I've seen so far. We get a lot of this chart review projects, and that review could be expedited. That could be IRB expedited, and this is under category 5 of one of the documents, or the that documents. I would say published by Health Services Research, by NIH, and other international entities. These are under that category 5. There are many categories in there, but under this category, the materials involving like documents and records and stuff like that were not collected for research are part of this expedited category. Even data collected for research, but not for the research you're proposing, also qualifies for the expedited research, provided that the expedited or the project does not involve more than minimal risk. When you read this or you have your chart, you might say, oh, my study chart review does not involve more than minimal risk. It does if there's some identifying information and it's not proper protection of that information. In that case, you are not minimal risk. You can expose patients or subjects to damage of some sort. REDCap, as I said, it's this enterprise that it's supported by the a lot of this by NIH, by member institutions, I believe, and the CTSI, CTSI has, as I mentioned before, a system. It has that installed in a system, in a server that is HIPAA compliant, and they recommend the REDCap organization recommends to citing REDCap as your EDC. So that's it for me, and we can then get on going with creating a database using REDCap.
So let's get into it and start actually creating a database. We'll go over the steps to do that. So is there anybody right now that has any problem logging into REDCap at the moment? Because we're going to be going over some breakout room activities a little bit later on where we'll be starting to create a test database. And if you do, just shoot one of us a chat message and we can try to help out. So in the REDCap interface, you'll see the top bar right here. This is basically like the landing page for when you log into REDCap. What you'll see is that you have a button for My Projects. This will take you to all the projects that you're currently a part of. Then there's a tab for creating new projects. If you want to create an entire new project, you would click on this. Even those of us that have been working with REDCap for a while still have questions sometimes. So there's a help and FAQ button right there. Training videos, which can really help if you're trying to understand some more complex topics within REDCap. A button where you can send your data securely to other people, and then a messenger button for checking notifications and sending messages in REDCap. Once you've entered into the project that you want to work on, there is a menu bar to the left that contains a lot of stuff. I know this looks overwhelming right now, but the more you use REDCap, the more intuitive it'll become. And this contains everything that you could possibly want to do pretty much within whatever project you are currently in REDCap. Right here contains a lot of useful tools for navigating through your current REDCap project that you have, where you can go to the home page for the project, the designer, modify your data dictionary and codebook. The data collection section lets you go to certain observations in your data set, certain records, if you want, or just review all records, adding, deleting records. And then certain applications, which can be useful depending on the project that you're doing, helps you with reports, calendars, notifications, things of that nature. And then the help and information section on the left right there. To create a new database, as we said, you have to click on New Project. Once you click on New Project, REDCap will ask you couple things. It'll ask you the project title, the purpose of the project, just for informational purposes, some project notes if you have any, and then if you're going to be creating a project from scratch or using some kind of template. And there are certain templates down here that you can choose from to start off a project if it's similar to one of those that have already been created. So you can go through here. Once you select purpose of the project, how it will be used, there will be some additional questions like name of the PI, the email of the PI, IRB number, which you'll probably have, and then the different types of possible uses of the project. Once you've selected all of those, you can click Create Project to create the project. You won't have any forms or anything in the project, you won't have any questions, but the shell of the project will be created at that point. Once that's done, you can start setting up things within the project. If you go to the main page for the project, you'll see these tabs: Project Home, Project Setup, etc. Project Setup is where a lot of the options about the project are specified, and we'll be going through this a little bit later, but things like main project settings, like are you using surveys, is this a longitudinal project, designing the data collection instruments, these are the forms that you're going to be using or distributing, and then different modules as well. So within main project setting, there are two options. The first one is if we're using surveys. Surveys are there are forms that are sent out for completion by the participants. Then the longitudinal data will be used if you have multiple have certain variables that are collected at multiple time points. So if you have a particular form that you're going to be collecting data on, maybe at baseline, 1 month, 2 months, etc. We won't need to recreate that form every month. We can just enable this, and that will make it easy for you to distribute that form as time goes on. You'll see at the top left that it says project status is in development. Project status will be development until it is deployed. And for the use of surveys, are you sending out email surveys? If you are, then you'll want to enable this feature for the use of surveys in this project. Sometimes you might want to modify something that you've entered before, or add project notes by clicking this button right here, modify project title, purpose, etc. That will let you go back, and what we had just talked about a couple slides ago, you'll be able to edit that information as well. So I think right now it is time for a breakout room, if I'm not mistaken, where we will begin to create the database.
Oh, Trevor, it's actually slide 46.
Okay. Let me see what slide 26 is, just a second. This does look like slide 26.
Oh, 46, Trevor, sorry.
Oh, 46, okay.
Yes.
All right, we're gonna keep going. Okay. So it probably makes sense that we would want some forms in our database, some questions that will be filling out some items. So the way that this is done is through the online designer, namely in the format of forms. Forms are what we use to collect data within REDCap. In order to design your data collection instruments, you'll go to the Design Your Data Collection Instrument section and click on the Online Designer. Online Designer is going to let you create those forms that you need for your project. You can do this a couple different ways. One is to enter the forms via an online designer. If you do this, you'll be dealing with things like forms, the different variables in your data set. You don't necessarily have to have all variables be manually entered. You can have some fields calculated. Things like BMI, if you enter height and weight, REDCap can calculate BMI for you from those two variables. We don't recommend a lot of calculated fields within your REDCap database. If you have things that you want to be automatically calculated, that's something that we recommend you let your data analyst do afterwards. You can also, within this online designer, designate variables that are personal identifiers. This is something that we want to do to protect the confidentiality of the particular participants in the study. And by designating certain variables as identifiers, that will affect how they are treated down the line. And we'll talk about that also a little bit later. Not everything has to be created completely from scratch. You can have a data collection instrument that is uploaded from a different source. And there are lots of these available to you in REDCap that they have a whole repository of forms that have already been created. So you can use the import function to import forms. Make sure that when you do this, you follow copyright laws, if applicable, when using those materials. There's also a button for creating PDFs for paper data collection. If you want to take the form that you have within REDCap and maybe print out a PDF and send it to somebody that's reviewing the study or your statistician, or print it out, and then if somebody is unable to take the survey online, they can fill it out with paper and pencil. And that's done through creating PDFs for paper data collection. All right, so this online designer, this is one of the first places you'll want to go to because that's where we create the forms. When you go to a new project, you will see in this section that you will not have any instruments other than my first instrument, possibly. This is where you're going to want to put all of the forms. And to do that, we need to create a new instrument from scratch. You can click this button right here, the plus button, to add a new form to your REDCap database. Each of the instruments that you create will be down here. If you click on the instrument name, you can modify it. You'll probably want to modify the name of the default instrument that is in this list. Actions on the right are where you can rename the instrument. You can copy an instrument if you want to place it somewhere else. You can delete an instrument if you'd like to. This is all done through instrument actions on the right. And this fields column right here tells you how many variables you have in that particular form. You can also import an instrument from the official REDCap shared library if you'd like to. How does that work? One of the best ways to figure out if there's a form for what you're looking for is to do a keyword search of the type of form that you'd like. So if you're looking for a form that collects demographic information about participants, you might want to start with a keyword search for demographic right here. And you'll see that if you do that, a lot of instruments are displayed for you. There's lots of different types of demographic data forms. One of the ones that we might want to use is the CDash version 1.1 demographics form right here. Once we click on that, it will give you information about who submitted it to the REDCap library, a brief description of this particular form. So the CDash was developed via CDIS, these consensus-based standards development process. It contains the basic recommended minimal data collection fields for 18 domains. So this is what is in this form if you import it. You can view the form before importing it into your REDCap database. And when you decide that you want to import it into your REDCap project, you would click this button right here, import, and once you do that, it will now appear in the list of data collection instruments. Here's an example of a database that would have multiple forms. So let's say that we're doing a particular study where individuals have some sort of intake evaluation, so a baseline evaluation. We would have their baseline evaluation form right here. And there would be, in this case, there are 5 variables that we collect at baseline. Then if there's a weekly check-in, we would develop that weekly check-in instrument, 17 variables. And the reason that this is going to differ from the intake evaluation is that we would want, I would assume, to send the weekly check-in form to the participants or collect that data on a weekly basis. So we would then set up a longitudinal form collection process for weekly check-in. Then there might be some event that triggers fitness testing or some benchmark, maybe 2 weeks into the study where they do fitness testing. And we would want to create a different form for that. This form has 11 variables. And then we also, in this case, have another form for volunteer tracking, 8 variables in that particular instrument. Once we click on one of these forms, we are taken to the view of all of the variables within a particular form. Here, we're looking at an instrument called Basic Demographics. We will see at the top that we have a record ID. This record ID is how REDCap will identify your participants. It gives you a unique identifier for every participant in the study. Record ID is automatically added for you as the first variable of the first form. This variable can be renamed if you'd like to, but this variable will be right there, and it is just automatically filled in as you go along. In this particular form, we have contact information. So we've asked for the participant's first name, last name, their city, their street, city, state, zip code, and phone number. In order to create these particular variables here, we would click on Add Field. Add Field will give you a new variable or, in this case, a new section header. Once you have the variables in this view, if you want to change the order in which they're presented, you can just drag and reshuffle the order as you go through that. If you click Add a New Field, the first thing that REDCap wants to know is what field type is it? Most of the time, at least in my experience, it's either a text box or maybe a multiple choice type question. You can also have a notes box, which allows for longer blocks of text. You can collect participant signatures. You can have them upload a file, things like that. In this case, we've created a text box variable. So we know that there will be some sort of combination of letters and numbers being entered into this variable. Variables need labels. This is what will appear to your data collectors or your participants who are filling out this survey. Right in field label is where you label the variable. Variable name is what the variable will look like in the database. That is the name of the variable in the database. So you can have longer, more descriptive names in the field label and more concise variable names in the variable name section. If you don't specify your own variable name, then REDCap will automatically suggest a variable name for you to use. I recommend consulting with somebody who's going to be analyzing the data in order to figure out what the variable names should be. Validation is optional, but it can really help you out in terms of making sure that you have the right type of data entered into that variable. It specifies the type of variable and any limits on it. So if you have let's say weight in pounds. This makes sure that you don't enter in maybe, I don't know, a 1-digit number for weight in pounds if this is adult participants. You specify unique identifiers with the red identifier section here. Most of them won't be unique identifiers or patient identifiers, but sometimes they will be. This is things like social security numbers, names, addresses, medical record numbers, things like that, that can be possibly identifying to the participant. And also optional, but can be quite helpful, are field notes. This will add a little note under each of the form fields. So all of these fields here have field notes. This required for a field right here has a field note, prompt if field is blank. The field note section has a field note on it, small reminder text displayed underneath field. It will look like this right here, this small reminder text that is under the field. I've used that before to specify if we're collecting data in a clinical setting, what are the units for that particular variable, or what is the unit of measurement, the scale of measurement for a particular variable. And we're going to slide 46. So we'll keep going through here. Validation is very important, and it'll make your statistician very happy to have as few problems with the data as possible, and validation can help out with that. So whenever possible, try to avoid using free text fields. Whenever you can, if you have a field that is a limited set of options, try to use a categorical field type like multiple choice, yes, no, true, false. This makes sure that you're collecting the type of data that you're expecting, and it will minimize the time spent on data cleaning later. So for example, if we're asking about participants' race, if you have a free text field, what you could see is that a particular person enters in African American for their race. Another person enters in African American for their race. Both the same thing for somebody that isn't analyzing the data, but if you are analyzing the data, these are two completely different entries, and that's going to cause a lot of headaches down the road. There might be a data collector that abbreviates AA for African American. It might make sense to them that AA is African American, but for the software analyzing this, it'll treat it as a completely different category. And then somebody else puts in black right there. This is not the way to go. If we can, in this situation, what we would want to do is create a multiple choice type variable for this race, where the participant or data collector selects the race category from this list. I think we have another example on the next slide. That back up. Oh, that is weird. Okay, my PowerPoint is stopping when I try to transition to the next slide. Let's skip over.
Okay, Trevor, I could pull up my slides.
I think I'm good. I just need to manually scroll to the next one.
Okay.
I will share as an anecdote in a recent study. There was a clinical form that had several yes or no questions for the presence of comorbidities. The code book said that a 1 means yes and a 0 means no for the presence of that comorbidity. But when I went to analyze the data, there were ones and zeros and Y's and N's in that field. And so this went through multiple different iterations of my performing the data analysis, figuring out that there were Y's and N's, figuring out how to deal with that, and making sure that we went back and had to validate things again, and them going through, taking out the Y's and N's, but then they left one sole Y in there, and then that messed things up later on. So prevention is really important in this case. If you have to use a free text field, try to add validation when possible. So for weight, you might have somebody enter in 185 lbs, 185 pounds. You can see where this is going. 185, and then their finger slipped, and then they entered in 2 additional 5s. These are all non-validated. These are all due to not having validation. One of the things that we want to do is make it clear the unit of measurement. In this case, if we have weight, we would want to enter it in as pounds. It can be a common misunderstanding. Maybe they would enter it in kilograms, and they didn't know that, and so they see enter in pounds, and so then they ensure it's actually entered in pounds. The other thing that we can do is make sure, one, that we are expecting a number or an integer. We can use validation to say, well, if we see letters in this, it's no good, redo it. We can also specify we want to see this number be in a certain range. How would we do that? If we have the variable weight right here, in the validation section, we say we want this to be a number. This will have REDCap expect a number from this. And in this case, we've set a minimum of 70 and a maximum of 400. So if it sees an entry that's outside of that range, it'll say something's wrong, re-enter it. And then we've added this field note to make it clear that we want this to be in pounds. The required section right here asks if that variable is required in order to proceed. If you select required, then REDCap will make the person filling in the form put a response for that particular variable. We can see the different types of validation here. Lots of times we want to use integers or numbers, integer being a whole number, no decimals. There are lots of different date formats that we can use. Action tags are another way to customize your survey a little bit more and make sure that the participant or the data entry person is seeing only the things that they really need to see. So action tags are very versatile. It takes a little bit longer to go into all the functionality of action tags, but you can do some pretty interesting things like hiding one or more choices of a multiple choice field. If you have some checkboxes that a participant can check, it allows a maximum number of checkboxes. So if you say select your top 2, let's say in this case we have ice cream, nachos, pizza, cheesecake, and you want the participant to select their top 2 favorite foods, you could use an action tag to make sure that they've only selected 2 of those. It also allows to designate a checkbox choice to be a none of the above option. You might say, well, why don't you just add a none of the above option right here? Well, an action tag will make sure that if none of the above is checked, that nothing else is checked, because you wouldn't want a participant to say that they like ice cream and none of the above. An example of how to do that in this case is if we have ice, what is your favorite dessert, ice cream, chocolate, or cake? What we would do for action tags is at none of the above equals 4. Here we have none of the above as one of the choices, but the action tag has actually said, if 4 is selected, then none of the above should also be selected. we might be ready to create this instrument in our project, but before you finish creating any instrument, what you want to do to make sure is that you've checked for personal identifiers and make sure all fields have appropriate validation. Right here, you'll see, have you checked for identifiers page to ensure all identifier fields have been tagged. Clicking on this will allow you to do that. And once you have checked all of that, it will say that your form is complete with a green checkbox, which we know means you're doing good. Okay, now we've reached slide 46, where we'll be validating our variables. We're going to go into the breakout rooms and do that. All right, so let's continue on. Just a couple more things, and we'll go back to another breakout room. So as much as you can, make life easy for you as far as setting up the survey and having the participants take the survey. So if you find that you're going to have a section where there are going to be a lot of questions that have the same type of answer, true, false, yes, no, or if you're developing maybe like a Likert scale and you have 5 questions about depression or something like that, a great way to do this is by adding a matrix of fields. So you will see that there is matrix header text. This will be the header text for that particular section. And then instead of having to create a question, let's say you're doing a 10-item like inventory or something like that, instead of having to create 10 separate questions, what you can do is have each question be a row in this matrix. It will give you the field label, do you smoke, the variable name that you want to see in the database, smoke, and then required field annotation. So all of the information from the variable creation section that we had before now is on just one row. So you can add lots of questions at one time. Do you smoke? Do you drink alcohol? Do you consume other illicit substances? Things like that. All of these going down, and it saves you from having to create one variable at a time. We see here that the matrix column choices 1 and 0, so all of these questions are going to have a 1 or a 0 as the response. It will be as radio buttons, and then matrix group name right here is it gives you, actually, what is does anybody know what the matrix group name is? I haven't done this before for matrix group name.
It's just the general name for the matrix.
Okay, but it doesn't. Does it have any implications other than this?
Not really, no, just when you want to
Okay.
go edit it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's more information. Okay, great. Then when you actually create the matrix, it will look like this. So matrix group, yes, no, this is the name of the matrix group for your informational purposes. And then you'll have each of the variables within that matrix. So the smoke variable here, the alcohol variable here. And then you can see that instead of saying yes and no for each of these, it is just like a column, check this for yes, check this for no right here. Shortcuts for modifying variables. There are so many different icons for things nowadays, and sometimes I think developers think that they're self-explanatory, but they're not always. So here are the most commonly used icons for modifying variables in REDCap. The pencil stands for editing. The 2 sheets of paper stands for copying. The green arrows stand for branching logic. The paper with the little arrows stands for moving, and the X stands for deleting. One of the things that we haven't done, we don't really know about, is branching logic right here. We'll talk about that coming up as well. That represents a situation in which your variable under consideration is dependent on other variables that have been in the data set prior to it. So if the question, if you have a particular question that asks if a participant is male or female, maybe you only want to show certain subsequent questions if the participant is female or if the participant is male. Branching logic can help you with that. And one of those might be if the participant says that they're a woman, you would ask them about date of last menses. You wouldn't want to ask that of a male. If you have participants at a certain study site, maybe there's just one, one-off question that you want to ask that's contingent on them being at a certain site. Calculated variables, also dependent on other variables. We can use forms from other fields to compute another variable. But like I said before, this is probably generally discouraged. Use it sparingly. If you're going to be doing data manipulation, it's probably best to use a statistical program for that. So let's talk about how to use branching logic. If you're going to use branching logic, what you have to do is specify the variable that sets the branching logic and the variable that's sort of downstream from that. You have to set both of those before you start talking about branching logic. The branching variable has to come first on the form. So if you have variables that are dependent on the participant being female, the participant's sex has to be listed above all of the other variables on the form that use sex as branching logic. In our example here, we have a case in which we ask people the different foods they like, and if they choose that they like nachos as a food item, the main variable would be called likes. So what sorts of food do you like? And then we might have a branching variable that's called likes nachos. We would only show that variable if the participant says they like nachos. So likes variable right here, the variable is likes. Check the variables or check the items that you like. Do you like ice cream, nachos, pizza, cheesecake? And then we see down here that branching logic has been created. The likes nachos variables has to be created first, and then you can set up the branching logic. And the branching logic in red right here says that likes to, so likes to means that the likes variable right here is, the likes variable here, option 2. Option 2 is nachos. So likes variable option 2 is equal to 1. And so that will be equal to 1 when it's checked, and it will be equal to 0 if it's not checked. So this is a way of saying, essentially, is nachos checked, yes or no? And if nachos is checked, then we can ask the participant, why do they like nachos? Because they're beany, cheesy, crunchy, pretty. All different reasons to like nachos. Salty is not on it. That would be another good one too. And the way that we set up that branching logic is in this variable here, the variable that's dependent on the prior variable, you would click the green arrows from branching logic. The actual implementation of the branching logic doesn't show in development mode. So you don't get to see, you will see all of the variables and all of the notes about the branching logic in development mode. The implementation of the branching logic won't happen in development mode. There are two different ways to do branching logic. You can do it through the advanced branching logic syntax. So if you know how you want to code it and how that's done, you can use this up here, or you can use the drag and drop logic builder. So in this case, we are displaying field choices from the nacho survey. And it says right here, choose method below for the following field likes nachos. So when are we going to show this likes nachos variable? And we see all the options down here of particular conditions under which we might want to show the likes nachos variable. And out of all of these conditions, the only one that we'd really want to show the likes nachos variable is if they said likes equals nachos. So if they like nachos, we will drag that and show that field only if likes equals nachos. You will see the branching logic on the screen in the red right here. That'll tell you that this variable has branching logic, so there are only certain conditions under which the variable will be shown to the data collector or the participant. To do calculated fields, you just select that the field type is a calculated field. Upon doing that, you will see the calculation equation, and this particular field right here, the calculation equation, is where you will enter in how do you calculate this calculated field. In REDCap, the way that you refer to other variables that are in your particular project are through the brackets. So when you put weight in brackets, this refers to the value that has been entered in to the weight variable, and same thing with height. So the calculation in this case of BMI is weight divided by height squared times 703. And we're going to keep going before the next breakout room with one more thing. I think we have piping. We've seen that to refer to another variable that's in our project, we put that variable name in brackets. We're going to use that with piping. Piping lets us take a value that's been entered into our form previously and pipe it in somewhere else. Why you might want to do that, there could be a lot of different reasons why you might want to do that, but piping will let you do it. You'll see right here, and you've seen it before, that when you add a new field, add a new variable, there's two buttons right here, how to use smart variables and piping. If you click how to use piping, it will take you to a section that will tell you all about it. But just as a brief overview right here, we're going to do a simple piping example. In this case, we have created a text box, and it looks like we want to know when the participant began fish oil supplement. So we have the field label here, and we have the name of the variable that tells us the date that they started taking fish oil. So now this variable is in our instrument. So the first thing that we would do in this case is set up the piping of the date started fish oil onto are you still taking fish oil field label. Okay, so what we did is we have a variable called date start fish oil. This tells us when they started taking the fish oil. The next question that we're going to ask is you reported you started taking fish oil supplements on, and then we see right here that the variable name for the date that they started taking fish oil is in brackets. It appears like this to us, but for the person actually filling out the form, the value of what they entered in on this variable, the date they started taking fish oil, is going to be displayed instead. So what this does is when the participant sees it, it'll say you reported you started taking fish oil supplements on October 8th, 2020. Are you still taking the fish oil supplement? Assuming that was the date that they entered. In this case, it looks like the participant said that they had began taking fish oil supplement on December 7th, 2020. So when they go to the next variable, it'll say you reported you started taking fish oil supplements on 12/7/2020. Are you still taking the fish oil supplement? We have piped in the value of this date into the label of the next variable. And so you can do this to refer to lots of different things. Let's say that the participant's doctor's name is on there. You might want to pipe the doctor's name into a variable that says, has Dr. So-and-so ever told you that X, Y, Z? That could be something that you would want to do. So we'll go through a piping example right here.
Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about creating those data forms in your database, now we're going to talk about more specifically defining study events and specifying what kind of data is collected and when. So what are study events? So a study event is a point in time in which data is collected. So this could be predetermined by your study design. So you have planned data collection time periods or planned data collection events. So they could be pre-screening, baseline, post-intervention follow-up. This follow-up could be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, etc. Or another example, you're collecting data that time of injection, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. So these are all predetermined planned study events. These can also be irregular events, so unplanned. For an example, adverse events, if the patient or subject has an adverse event, or unplanned or irregular doctor's visits. Those are all study events, but they're unplanned. They're not built into certain time periods in your study. So a couple things to consider. So the first thing is your data collected once? So is it a cross-sectional or kind of a survey design? You're only collecting data at one point in time, or are you collecting it at multiple times longitudinally throughout your study? And then the next thing to consider is what I just sort of mentioned, is are you collecting that data at regular intervals? For example, baseline 6 months, 12 months, or is that those irregular intervals such as adverse events or unscheduled or irregular doctor's visits? And then the next thing to consider is every participant getting the same data collection schedule, or are they getting the same data collected on them? So for an example is a drug study that requires regular blood draws in a treatment group to monitor the toxicity, but it is not collected in the control group. So for example, your treatment group may be collecting data 6 months, 12 months, 18 months for follow-up to monitor the toxicity, but your control group is only getting baseline and follow-up data collected on them. So an example of just, sorry about that. So an example for this kind of collection method is, so you have your 3 study events, you have baseline, post-test, and follow-up. So this is all the data that you're being collected throughout the entire study. And you can see at baseline, all participants are getting all data collected, inclusion, exclusion criteria, demographic, group assignments, anthropometric, hormones, quality of life data. However, at post-test, so that next study event, they're only collecting H&P, anthropometric, hormones, and quality of life data. And then at follow-up, they're only collecting H&P and quality of life data. So that's why you want to make sure that you're defining specific study events, and you want to make sure what data you're collecting at each specific event, especially if they're different. So defining and designating instruments that are part of a planned study design. So again, those are set periods throughout your study, 6 months, 12 months, etc. So there's 3 steps that you want to follow. So the first one, you're going to want to be able to enable longitudinal data collection, and we'll see where to find this in a minute. But that's the first step you want to do, is then allow REDCap or tell REDCap that you're collecting data longitudinally at more than one time point. The next step is to define those events. So define those specific study events, baseline events, 6 months, 12 months, post-test, etc. Whatever those events may be specific to your study. And then you're going to want to designate specific instruments, data collection instruments for those events. As you saw on the previous slide, they were collecting different data at different time points. So you're going to want to have different instruments for those, especially if you're collecting more than one kind of data in a study event. So this first step, you're going to go into the project setup page. I believe it's the first box. It's just main project settings. You're going to want to enable longitudinal data collection with defined events. So this is default disabled. So you're going to want to go in and enable this first. Then the second step is to define your events. So you notice that the defining your events and defining instruments are right next to each other. You're going to want to define your events first, because it won't let you designate instruments if you don't have more than one event defined. So the next step right underneath after you set longitudinal data is to define your events. And then once you have your events defined, or this is where you're going to actually define those events. So you can see right now we just have one arm. You're going to click add a new event and just type it in there. For example, we have baseline, post-test, and follow-up. So you're going to define those 3 events. You can also upload or download specific events, but usually you're going to just want to define your own at specific time points because it's going to be more specific to your study. And then the third step is designating those instruments. So once you have all of your study events defined, you're going to want to set specific instruments that will be available for collection at each of those time points. So for example, we've defined all of our events. We have our baseline, post-test, and follow-up events. And then we have all of our data collection instruments here. We have exclusion, inclusion, demographic, cortisol, quality of life, et cetera. You're going to want to specify which data collection instrument is going to be available at each time. So this should look like your data collection matrix. So for example, here at baseline, they're collecting all of your information and then less as they go through post-test and follow-up. So to be able to set this, you want to click on begin editing, and then it'll allow you to check which data is available where, and you can check which instruments you want to use specific to each follow-up event or study event. Then you want to click all, and then you want to make sure you want to click save after you finish this, so it'll save it all in there. Otherwise, it'll just reset it back to the default. So those are defining events and defining those instruments. Now that we've defined our events and designated certain instruments for those events, we're going to talk about study arms. So what is a study arm? So this allows for different data collection tools and different timing and data collections for different groups. So this is really applicable when you have more than one group in your study that you want to collect data for, probably at different times or in different kinds of data. So you can group events into arms. There can be more than one arm per project, and each arm can have as many events as needed. So you can designate as many of those study events as you want for each of those arms. So for an example, 2 arms in a study might be a treatment versus a control group, because you're going to be comparing those 2 groups together, and you're probably going to be collecting different data at different event times for them. I think we talked earlier that for the treatment group, they might have been collecting data, blood draws to monitor toxicity, where in control groups, they're not taking that. So those are 2 study arms that have different event times. So the first thing you're going to do to set up those arms, you want to make sure, again, you use a longitudinal setup, because this is going to allow you to define events and to designate different data collection instruments. So, and then this is in the project setup page. So again, we're going right back to where you define your events in the project setup page. And then for before, we only had 1 arm, and then you would just click on adding a new arm. Arm 1, for example, could be our control group. Arm 2 could be the intervention group. So these are just the 2 groups that you have in your study. And then you're going to designate different instruments for those arms. So again, the same page, just the same way we designated it before for those events, you're going to designate it for the second arm. So for whatever treatment group you are, you're going to collect or select the data collection tools that you need for the treatment group. So this could be first instrument, weekly check-in, fitness testing, volunteer tracking across those different study events. So now defining and designating instruments that may be collected at multiple unplanned times. So before we talked about planned study events, baseline, 6 months, 12 months, those are all planned and designed into your study. But now if we're looking at unplanned time, so events like adverse events or unscheduled doctor's visits, these instruments and events can be repeated an unlimited number of times, and you don't have to specify you're going to be collecting data twice, because unplanned events could happen, you know, X amount of time. So you want to make sure that those can be repeated. So there's 2 steps to do that. So the first, you're going to assign a CFR, which is a case report form, to event times. So those are forms that you're going to collect that data for those unplanned events. And then the second step is you're going to want to enable those instruments to be repeatable, as well as the events. because they're unplanned, they could happen once or twice or 10 times if that's possible. You want to make sure they're repeatable and not only usable for one study event at one certain time. So there's a video that details a lot more into this. If you would like to watch that and get more information. And this is assigning a CRF to an event. So you add that as a data collection instrument, and you're not going to be using that at base time. So you want to only select that for post-test and follow-up events. That's going to allow that to be used during those different study events. And then you want to enable those instruments to be repeatable. So this is in the project setup page. You just click on that, repeatable instruments and events, and make sure you save that so you're able to use those instruments more than one time. And then this is just the same thing, just a little bit more into that. If you want to assign specific data collection times, specific report forms at certain event times. So you see the adverse event form, that case report form. You want to make sure those are repeatable for the post-test and follow-up time, so you can record more than one events during those time periods. So there's a lot of ways that this could go wrong using the different forms. If you repeat a form, baseline something by accident multiple times, that'll definitely mess up your data collection. So make sure you're careful with assigning those instruments, which ones are repeatable and which events are repeatable. And again, there's a video, very in-depth, but it has a lot more information about that, about study arms and repeatable instruments and unplanned adverse events. So I think something real quick before we do the next breakout room is, in terms of the two study arms, it's really most useful to create those two arms if you have like a comparison and a treatment group, because you're going to be collecting different data at different time periods, versus if you just have two treatment groups, it may be easier just to create an indicator variable in your data set defining which group those treatments are in if you're collecting the same data. So that's just something to keep in mind.
So Janine asked, how do you indicate the arm 1, arm 2? So actually when, I would suggest in the breakout rooms, we try making an arm, and when you do the data entry, you'll see that you'll be able to switch, the data entry screens will allow you to choose what arm you're doing data entry for and editing for. So let's try that in the breakout room, and I think it's more answerable that way.
Define your users and permission. So in research, usually there will be a group of people working on a study. It's a collaborative work. It's not a one-man show. So not all team members will be sharing the same role or work on data entry. So therefore, you should grant different levels of access to database based on their roles in a study. You can assign user rights for each team members using the user rights feature. In REDCap, you also can limit a user access to records in a database using DAX, Data Access Group. This feature is commonly used in a multi-site studies. For example, suppose you are conducting a multi-site studies, you can limit a user access to records according to center. By doing that, the users from a specific centers only get access to their data, but not all records in the database. Let's see. So to add a user, to add a user, and then you also want to think about like each member's user rights. So some of the things that you should think and consider, like who get access to the database. You don't want everyone to get access to the database. So you want to make sure that you're giving to the right person to access your database. To what extent will the user be accessing? Should they be able to make changes to data collection form? Or will they be entering data, or they can just view the data but not able to make any changes to records? Or are they be able to create reports, identifying information, and so on. So to add a user with a customize, you can go under user rights and permission, the button right here, or on the left menu under application, the user right. Either one, it will take you to add a user. And then you will see this page, and then you can start adding user by typing their name on this box. So before you add a user, make sure they have a REDCap account and have signed on to REDCap at least one time, or else you will not be able to locate the username. So if the person has the account, you can just type in their name and you will see their name and their REDCap ID will show up. Then select that user, and then you can either click with custom rights to assign some of the settings to the user, or you can create a role right over here and assign to the user to that role, depending whether you want to create, whether that person is going to do a data entry or a project manager. Once you click add with custom rights, and you will see this page. So there's two columns. One is basic rights settings on the left, and one is data entry rights on your right. So I'm going to go through each of the settings. So for expiration date, let's say if you have a person no longer part of the study, so you can put in a date where, so that the person who no longer in the study will not be able to access to the database. Then you will have other privileges that you can assign to the user, whether the person are doing the design and setting up the database, or add user, or even create data access group. So, and then right here is the privilege for the user to be able to export data. If you select de-identify, then the user will not be able to export any identifier notes or text boxes. So if you want a user to be able to export all the data, make sure you not checked de-identify, check in specify, have an option specify full data set instead. And then data and edits reports, stat and charts. And then right here, you have like other privilege, whether you can specify whether the user be able to have access to calendar, data import tools, comparison tools, all these other privilege. Oops. And then one more thing, it's at the bottom here, there's a settings pertaining to project records where a user can either create records, rename records, or delete records. So for delete records, to avoid any mishap, just be mindful, don't simply grant delete records access to any users. So keep in mind, just be mindful of the delete records access. On the right over here, data entry rights. So here are all the forms that you have created. It should appear right here. And then you can specify what are the rights the user can have for each form. Either they be able to make changes, then you want to click view and edit, or they only can just view the data, not making any changes. You can just select read only. However, the first form, make sure you do not click on no access if the data, the user is doing data entry, because when you click the first form with no access, that user will not be able to create new records. And then once you're done with all the settings, and just click on add user. For setting up data access group, you can create groups according to what is appropriate for the projects. And then, for example, if you have multi-center study and you can create groups for each center, how do you do that? You can go to, see, DAX, under application, just click on DAX, and then you will see this page, create new groups. So, for example, we have a study that involving CHLA and USC. So we create two groups, CHLA and USC. Then you will see these two groups are created in the data access group. Then you will want to make sure you add all the users into your database, and then you're going to assign each of them to a specific right, and then you're going to assign them to a group. And then to assign them to a specific group, you go back to the DAX page, click on the DAX on the left, and then you can start assigning a user to the specific group. So what you do here, if you have all the user right here, and then you can select the user by these drop-down menus. You can select whichever user that you would want to assign, and then assign them to a group, whether CHL, in this case, whether to CHLA or USC, and then click on assign. So once you have assigned each user to the specific group, and then you will see all the users belong to the assigned group. So the user that assigned to a group, they can only access the data within their centers. And then those users are not assigned to any of the groups, get access to all records in the database. And then when you go to user rights, you can see each user have their own user rights. And then if you assign to a specific groups, then it will show it right here. So different groups will have a different access privilege. Entering data. So data entry sources are generally from case report form, or if it's other than case report form, it will be lab reports and etc. And then you would like to have all these information entered and saved in a database for your projects. And we're going to go through the steps on how to enter and edit data in REDCap. For entering data, go to add and edit records right here on the left under data collection. And in this page, you could either select existing records to edit if you already have some records in your database, and then you can click select records on this drop-down menu, and then you can select whichever subjects you want to make any the edits for that records. If you have you want to add new records, just simply click on new records on this button right here. Then it will take you to this data grid for the records that you have just selected. And then to enter the data, and then you can click on any form. Here are all the data collection form on your left side. And then you can click whichever form that you want to work on, click on the circle, and then to begin entering or editing data. Another way you can go to add and edit records from record status dashboard, which is right over here under data collection, data status dashboard. You can click this one, and it will allows you to add and edit records, and then it will bring you to this page. So in this screenshot, you will see there's 3 records already in under 1 and there's 2. So if select whichever records ID that you want to enter or edit the data. If you have more than one arm, make sure you select the correct arm and then click on the circle, and then it will bring you to the form and you can start enter your data or editing your data. So for the record status dashboard, it will display all records, all existing records. So sometimes you just want to, display only enrolled participants. You can configure your own dashboard by just create custom dashboard and then just click on this button. You can customize the dashboard the way how you want. So for when you enter data, make sure you complete as much as possible because you don't want to miss out any missing data. After you complete at each form, at the bottom of each form, you would see form status complete, and you can select the record status, either the data in entry is incomplete or unverified or complete. After you make the selection for the record status, you can make sure you save your data. So by clicking Save and Exit Form, allow you to save data that you have entered and go to that record homepage. If you click Save and Stay, is allow you to save the data that you have already entered, and then you can stay on that form and continue entering data. This is useful, especially you have a lot of fields that you need to fill up, and then make sure you save and as you go. And then there's another one, Save and Exit Record, allows you to save data and go to Add and Edit Records page. Save and go to the next record allows you to save data and go to the record homepage for the next subjects. So all the instruments that you have created in REDCap are essentially CRF. You can download a PDF for paper collection or for IRB application. So to download an instrument, simply click on this icon under the View PDF, and then you can select whichever form that you want, and then just click on the view the PDF icon. It will download that instrument to your local drive. Another way to download the instruments is to go from the record status dashboard. Click on any form, and then once you would click on a form and you will see this page. On top of the form, you will see download PDF of instruments. It's a drop-down menu. You can select option whether you want to download a single form or all the forms that you have created in the database with saved data or just blank form. So, and then next we go to export data. So once you've entered all the data, you want to be able to export the data and analyze your data. To do that, you go under application on your left hand side of the menu, and then click on data export and reports and stats. Then it will bring you to this page. So you have a couple options to export your data. Option A is to export all data, all records and fields. So if that is what you want to export all data, then you would click on export data. Or sometimes you only want to look at the data on specific instruments or events. Make sure you can do option B. Select the instruments that you want to export and the events. And then once you make your selection, and just click on export data. So if none of these options applicable to you, you can also create your own reports. So by click create reports, and then you can customize your reports, and you can add whichever fields and data that you want to export. Once you finish creating your report, make sure you give a name of the report and save it. It should appear right here. And then you can export your data by clicking this export data. Once you click the export data, it will bring you to this page. So in this screenshot, you will see export all data for all the records and fields. So you get to choose different formats. It depends on who you're working with. So if you're working with a statistician, and then if there's an option, then they will ask for export the data to their preferred statistical package, such as SAS, SPSS, R, or Stata. So in this example, we're going to take a look at if we select SAS, what's going to happen. So over here, we select SAS and export data, and then this page will show up. So for this one, you will see there's two files for you to download. One is data CSV file, one is SAS file. So the data CSV file contains all the raw data, and the SAS file is a syntax that format and label the raw data. So once you download to your local drive, and then make sure you save it to a folder or whichever path that you would like to work with. And then you can click on the SAS syntax. It will give you, you will see all these syntax that you have just downloaded. And then make sure to specify your location of your saved CSV data file. Make sure you, after you specify the location, and then you just run it, and then you will have the data set with all the labelings and the format according to each field. So REDCap also allows you to import data using the data import tools. This is useful when you have some data yet you have already collected that needs to import into the database. So the first step, you want to download the data. You go to data import tools, click on that, whoops. And then you will see this page. And then you want to download the data import templates, and then be sure to follow all these instructions carefully so that you be able to import your data without any errors. So once you download the data import template and save it as a CSV file, and then you will see when you open the CSV templates, and you will see all these, all the fields that you have created on top of the row for the CSV file. You don't have to put all this information in every field, only put the ones that you want to import. So you can enter the data in the fields that you want to import corresponds to the field, the variable names or the field names. And then make sure, here's the example that I already have. These are the data that I want to import into REDCap database. So in our breakout room, we have activity frequency. Then I have these data that I want to import to my database. So I make sure I have the format for each variable according to the codebook. So I make sure these codebooks are corresponding to each of the fields. Once you check everything looks correct, then you can upload your file. Make sure you save your file as a CSV file and then upload. Once you upload, you will see the data display table. So on top of here, these are the data that I import. And then if you look at the data display table, these are the data that I have already uploaded. So when import data, check for errors. So you can look at the key. Red box is error, or orange box is warning. So you don't want to have a red box or orange box. So look out for that. So in this example, I don't see any red box or red text, any colors, then you're good to go. And then click on import data, then all these data will be added to your database.
But I just want to say for the import data, it's very useful when you're getting lab data, for example. You send out your samples and you're getting lab results back in an Excel or CSV file or whatever. And what you might do is send it to your student to enter back into REDCap. And of course, there's going to be all kinds of transcription errors, et cetera, et cetera. You could set up your data import template and get those lab values in the correct columns and import in, and saves time and a lot of potential data entry errors. That's when I think that's one of the primary tools for using data import. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. We're just talking a bit. Do you see the full screen now? Yeah, okay. A bit about surveys. So we've alluded to the fact that you can make these data forms enterable by other people who are not users on your REDCap database. They might be participants in your study that you want to send out a link to, and they fill out the activity form. Right? We don't need to sit and enter it. We can just send a link to them, and they click on the link and enter the data, and it automatically goes into your REDCap database. Or you might be doing a study where you just want to know about people's attitudes about the infrastructure bill, whatever, just to be timely, or whatever. And so you just send out a mass email or put it on a social website. Can you please enter this? If you're interested in the study, could you just please go to this link and complete the survey, right? So that's called an anonymous survey versus something that you have already specified participants who are part of your study. So there are kind of two basic ways to use surveys. Otherwise, you're entering data in your REDCap database as data form. So you have to use surveys, and this is just very brief what we're doing. You might have noticed as we've been going through the screens that there's these little videos, pictures, and links to if you want more information. So go to the videos and tutorials. There's a good amount of information about using surveys. You can get very fancy with them in terms of making the survey text, the email text that sends out the survey, customized, and the response that when you finish is customized, and you can even add alerts and notifications that when a survey gets completed, so-and-so gets notified, et cetera, et cetera. So it can get very fancy. So we're just the very basics of surveys here. So as with any of these modules, types of things, you have to go into project setup and enable surveys. So REDCap knows that you're going to specify certain instruments as survey instruments. Not all of your instruments need to be surveys. Some you can enter, just keep some as forms that you're going to enter the data in, and others as surveys. So you're going to create your survey just like the data collection instrument. So you know already how to start the survey in terms of making what the survey looks like. And as I said, we've already created that activity form. We could make that into a survey. And as I said, the data then are provided by persons outside the study in terms of they're not part of the study team. your study participants or just people you send a link out to. There are two primary ways to distribute the survey. One, you can get the link from REDCap, which we'll see in a bit, and post that link. Send out a mass email or put it on a website, or however you can think about sending a link out to people. If you can send a link out to people in one way, then you can distribute the survey that way. The other way is that you can email selected individuals. So if we just send out a link to everybody, this is going to be anonymous. It also must be the first instrument in the survey. It's going to be anonymous. So you send out a link and you don't know who responds. You just know you got a response. If you really want to know, you can ask for some identifying information within your survey. If the IRB will allow you to do that, they probably won't, but you could try to do it that way. But usually these are anonymous. And just the other caveat here is that there's nothing stopping me from hitting that link repeatedly. If I feel really strongly about the infrastructure bill, I can hit that 25 times and enter the survey, right? 25 times. So a caveat with the anonymous surveys. If you're sending it to individuals within your study, it will link up to their study record and the data will go right into their study record. So if I sent out, I had subjects in my study that we're working on today, and I wanted to get the activity forms for baseline, I could send out that survey link to these individuals, and it would go, each would have a unique survey link linked to their ID, and they would enter that survey and it would go right into their data onto REDCap. That would go into the database as soon as they finish the survey and hit submit. So you want to be sure they hit submit, because if they don't hit submit, it's not going to go. So project setup, enable surveys. Are you going to use surveys in this project? You enable that. You're going to use, as you said, as we've been doing all day today, our online designer to create the survey. And this looks familiar. This is a project with some 3 forms. And you can see here that the weekly check-in survey form was enabled as a survey. The demographics and withdrawal forms are something that we want in this project. You want to keep just within the study team to enter that data. So that's not enabled as surveys. There's just one survey here that we're going to send out to participants. There are a lot of survey settings that you can investigate. You can automate when it goes out. If there's a series of surveys, you can customize the order of the survey, and you can kind of do some survey logic that they only get that survey if, kind of a branching logic type of thing, if they're male or if they've completed something or other. So there's lots of ways you can customize the whole survey flow that goes out. Just create the form, enable the survey, and define your survey features. Piping is very useful in surveys because your text invitation to the participant and the thank you that comes afterwards when they're done can be customized based on personal information. And as nice as automation is, we feel a little tired with automation. So as much as we can customize things and personalize things, it's really nice to do. So piping is really useful. Trevor had showed you this before. So we're going to create a field here. And we're going to create a field called first name. What is your first name? So we would already know this. Preferably, it would be maybe in our demographics form that we already did, so we could pull that variable already, the person's name. And in this situation, you're going to use piping before, as before, bracket, first name, So survey acknowledgement text Thank you for taking the survey. Have a nice day. You could be even more personal than that. This basically REDCap says, thank you, have a nice day. I think it might even be just have a nice day. It's pretty impersonal. So this personalizes it, right? So this person had entered that their first name was John. And when this John sees the survey and he submitted it, he says, John, thank you for taking the survey. Okay. Distributing anonymous surveys. There are different fields to look at this. Again, there's stuff on the left-hand side, a menu for distributing the surveys, but you can go to the survey link page. It will take you to that. Take the public survey link and it gives you a URL. Okay. You can send the URL to yourself and then use that to email out to others, or you can just copy paste this URL. Note there's QR code features too. If you could send out a QR code that people can just scan and get into the survey also. That's kind of a newer feature of surveys. As I said, you just grab the link to post to wherever you want to post it to. So that's it. As I said, it can get much more complicated than this, but it is a very nice feature that many of us use in terms of repeated instruments from our trial participants. Saves a lot on data entry time, but the caveat is that you have participants entering the data and they may not be as obsessive about filling out all the fields and doing things correctly, logically. So you have to check the data, but for completeness and whatnot. But it is a very nice feature of REDCap. Okay. Do we go to our breakout room then, Nisa?
We're at 12:54. I don't know if you want to continue with the breakout or just move on.
Yeah, why don't we just move on? So we're at the end. The slides that you get have gotten show a lot of other features that we're not going to cover, but they're there for you to look at. And then for those of you who want to stay, I don't know, Ramon, do you want to say anything else? But for those of you who want to stay after, Toupee has put together a little added on feature of another way to kind of customize your screens called embedded fields. So Naoko, you can leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naoko.
And anybody else can leave too. So I don't know if Ramon, you want to say anything else, but we will stick on and Toupee is going to do this 20 or so minute presentation.
No, thank you to everyone, all of us, first and the participants. The one thing I just want to say, there will be a survey coming your way, right, Lisa? We're going to send a survey.
A REDCap survey.
The REDCap survey. This is the.
That'd be pretty bad if we sent out a Qualtrics survey, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. So thanks, thank you everyone. And as Wendy said, you're welcome to stay or go. Thank you. You can keep on going. Thank you.
Go ahead, Toupee.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Embedded views. Sure. Okay. So field embedding is another way to customize your data entry form. So using field embedding is to reposition the field elements on the data entry form or survey form, and then you can embed it to a new location on the same page of a form or an instrument. And then this way you can customize your survey and data collection form the way how you want to look like. So how do we embed a field? So a field must exist before you can even embed it elsewhere on an instrument. Once a field is created, place the variable name of created field that you want to embed inside the curly brackets. Now in REDCap, you got to be really careful. The square bracket it's the field name. For the curly bracket, it's for embedded field embedding. The fields can be placed in a field label, field notes, section header, or choice label of another field on the same instrument. So to customize a data collection form, you use a field with table. This is the most common one. And then here are the steps. First, you create a field that you want to embed, and the fields can be text boxes, multiple choice, checkboxes, note box, or even calculated fields. Next, you will want to create a descriptive text field. Then you add a table in the descriptive text field label. And then you can start embed your created fields into the table by placing the field variable names inside the curly bracket. Once you're all done, save it. So here's the screenshot. So first, you create all these fields. Then after that, you will want to create another descriptive text field, and then you can add tables in the field label, and make sure you use a rich text editor so you can start play around, add your tables and the way how customize the way how you want to look. Like you can even customize the font, the color of the background, and all those kind of things. So this curly bracket right here is the field. It's from what I've already created. I embedded into these tables. Once I'm done, and make sure you give a variable name and then save it, and then you will see it. This is when after you finish designing build the table. And then on the front end, you will have this data collection form look like this, instead of having everything in one page going all the way down, and you have this table format. So it's nice to have a break, a different layout of your data collection form. So the most common place to embed a field is in the field label of a descriptive text field. Why? Is because it is simply blocks of text, and then therefore they are very perfect for using the rich text editor to build tables or complex structure for placing and embedded the fields. Make sure you check on the option, use the rich text editor. For embedded fields, the following icons are hidden by default, like data history, field comments. If you enable the missing data codes, the display of icons, you can display the icons by appending colon icons to the variable names inside the curly bracket, just like this. So if you have these semicolon icons, then you will see these icons for each embedded fields. If you click on the history, you will know like the data history. And then these icons right here is the field comments. However, field embeddings has their limitation, so they only relocates the actual field input. The field labels or field notes is hidden. Field may be embedded only in the field label, field notes, section header, or choice label of another field. Fields that cannot embed it into the following: drop-down labels, survey instructions, survey acknowledgement text, survey queue text, any outgoing emails or invitation or alerts. And all fields that involve in field embedding must be on the same instrument. And a field cannot embed it in itself, or you cannot even embed it in another field that it's already embedded. And record ID field cannot be embedded because it's a special field. Field embedded does not work in REDCap mobile apps. If you know, one of the, I think some project does have using the REDCap mobile apps, it does not work, and it will not show up the field embedding on the mobile app. However, embedding supports branching logic. So if you want to learn more on field embedding, here are the references and a tutorial video that you can check it out yourself. Then that's it. Let's see. To do the field embeddings. Let's see. So I'm gonna use the breakout room activities. Let's see. So we have a bunch of lab results, the blood count, metabolic panels. So instead of looking like this, you can preview the instruments, and I want to create a table. So I'm gonna add at the bottom and a descriptive text. Make sure I checked on this. Then you will see all these options. And then here's, I'm gonna create a table. How many? 3, 6. I'll just create more. So right here, I have metabolic panel, and then I have vital signs. Wait, no. Blood count. Vital. So then we have, I don't remember what we have. Glucose, hemoglobin, just put A1C, and then white blood cell, red blood cell, CP, so to embed it, I put a curly bracket and I go these variable names right here. Glucose. So then I'm done. I'm gonna delete the extra row, and then you can customize your table. So I'm gonna merge the cell. Okay, and save it. And then you see right here, and then of course you will not show it. So I'm going to go to, say I want to add a record. So it would show up the table right here. So the fields that you already embedded, those right now on the front end, it will be hidden. So it will show up in this table. So you can start entering your data using the form, customized form. This is one way of doing field embedding. So, and if you see right here, up here, you can even embed it in a field notes, and then you can click on checked, either the units, kg or in pounds. I can actually do that real quick to show you how it's being done. Let's see, medication. So we have these units that we have already created. So instead of having a separate, we want to put it on the field notes. This is how you do it. So dose unit, you can put right here, dose unit. So, and then you go to medication. So then you have your units show up underneath the text box of dose. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Thanks so much, Julie.
Yeah, no problem.
Are there any questions or comments before we all leave and say goodbye? As Ramon said, you'll be getting a survey, and please do respond to that. We find those very useful.
How come the pulse pressure came out to 0?
The pulse pressure is actually a calculated field.
Oh, and you hadn't put that in?
So if it's 0, because I put in 100 and 100, because 100
It's
minus
correct.
100 is 0.
It's
Unless,
correct.
yeah, unless I put like
This person is not alive.
120.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry. Thank you.
yeah, no problem.